The metal teeth of my harvester were just inches away from her Lamborghini when I realized this wasn't just about a blocked door anymore, it was about 20 cows baking alive behind it. So I did what any farmer would do. I let the machine speak for me. What happened next? It shook our entire town and made the internet choose a side. And by the way, if you've ever wanted to drive a harvester through entitlement, smash that like button and tell me in the comments what you would have done. The steel teeth of my harvester halted inches from the glossy rear end of her Lamborghini Urus cherry red, ceramic brakes, and a license plate that read Zen Life. The only thing between 2 tons of farming fury and her $100,000 yoga chariot was a pair of fuzzy dice swinging from the rearview mirror. Behind it, my barn doors were shut tight. Inside, the heat had turned the space into a convection oven. I could hear the cows lowing, restless, confused, and increasingly agitated. This wasn't just an inconvenience anymore. This was becoming dangerous. I gripped the wheel tighter. The engine of the harvester rumbled, a mechanical growl that echoed off the side of the barn like a warning. My jaw was clenched so hard I could feel it in my ears. And through all that pressure, one thought cut through like a cold wind. Not today. Karen, not when the herd needs me. But to understand how I ended up nose to tail with one of the most expensive SUVs on Earth, preparing to roll over it like a man plowing through pride, you'd have to rewind about 12 hours. That morning, I was on the porch with a chipped coffee mug in one hand and a local paper in the other, watching the sun burn the mist off the cornfields. Everything smelled like dew, diesel, and peace. Roy had just pulled up in his dented old pickup to drop off a water tank for the goat pen. We talked about the weather, the drought index, and how Martha's prized rooster had started nesting on a basket of tennis balls. Just another day in a town where change moves slower than molasses. That is, until Karen showed up. She didn't so much arrive as she descended like glitter and passive aggression rolled into one. She'd only moved to town 6 months ago, but she walked through the Saturday farmer's market like she owned the place, hair like a shampoo ad, giant sunglasses she never took off, yoga mat slung over one shoulder like a weapon. She was HOA royalty in exile, trying to convert our quiet rural town into some curated wellness wonderland. Her husband, from what we could piece together, made money off a tech startup involving AI and dental insurance. None of it mattered. What did matter was that Karen had started treating this town like a photo set and us like unpaid extras. That morning, she stormed the honey stand looking for her pre-reserved jar of imported Manuka honey and went full nuclear when she couldn't find it. She accused me of hoarding it for my livestock. The goats love sweet things, I joked, trying to diffuse the tension. She didn't laugh. She stomped, screeched something about me being emotionally violent, and yelled for someone to cancel me. Then she turned, barked at her assistant, and flounced off to her self-hosted yoga retreat a few fields over. I didn't think much of it, not until I got home and saw her Lamborghini parked backward up against my barn door, angled so tight it was practically French kissing the padlock. No note. No explanation, just her signature scent of citrusy smugness wafting from the open driver's window. I called her, no answer. I texted need access to barn, livestock inside, please move car, nothing. I walked 2 fields over to the retreat tent she'd set up. I didn't even get close. Her personal assistant, a 23-year-old in a linen suit with dead eyes and a clipboard, intercepted me like he was protecting the Dalai Lama. Ms. Karen is in a silent meditation cycle, he whispered, no interruptions. I could see her under the canopy, laughing and sipping from a green smoothie while surrounded by women in matching pastel athleisure. Silent. My ass. I went home, paced, waited, fumed, and then I heard them. The cows. It was nearing noon, the sun was relentless, and inside that barn, the temperature was pushing dangerous. Sure, we had fans installed, but they only worked with airflow with the doors open. Without that, it turned into a pressure cooker. I knew the signs: elevated respiration, dehydration, panic. You don't play politics when animals are at risk. This wasn't about ego anymore. This was about welfare, lives. So I called the sheriff. He was sympathetic, but useless. Private property? He sighed. We can't tow it without a court order unless it's an emergency with public safety implications. It is an emergency, I snapped. Livestock welfare. He paused. You'd need to file that under AG law. Might take a day. A day was too long. I called Roy. You still got the big green beast fueled up? He asked. I didn't respond. You're gonna have to move it yourself, he said. I could hear the grin in his voice. You know what to do. And I did. The green beast wasn't just a harvester. It was the Excalibur of farm machinery. John Deere, 9900 12-row header. 18 liters of righteous vengeance. It hadn't been used since last harvest, but it was gassed up and very, very ready. Even then, I didn't act on impulse. I taped a bright yellow note to the Lamborghini's windshield. Your vehicle is blocking emergency livestock access. You have 1 hour to move it. This is not a threat. This is a warning. The farmer. Then I waited. 60 minutes, nothing. I drove into town to cool off, hoping that when I returned, logic would have prevailed. It hadn't. She was lounging under her canopy, laughing, as if she hadn't just turned my barn into an oven. That's when I called Martha, former lawyer, now goat cheese artisan. I explained everything. There was a pause on the line. Then her calm, even voice replied, You're covered under the state's agricultural emergency clause. Document it, take pictures, film everything, and wear a nice hat. So I rallied the troops Roy, Martha, and young Dale the intern who milks goats on weekends. They brought folding chairs, iced tea, and their phones. I brought the harvester. I climbed in, adjusted the seat, turned the key. The engine roared to life with a sound like Judgment Day. I rolled forward, real slow, real steady, like a man not seeking war, but unwilling to lose one. The harvester roared like a dragon awakening from hibernation. The kind of sound that didn't just vibrate your chest, it carved its name in it. Dale, the intern, had started filming from his perch on the fence post. Roy sipped his tea, muttering, Lord have mercy, while Martha, ever calm, simply said, Let's hope her lawyer meditates as hard as she does. I wasn't trying to be theatrical. I wasn't trying to make a point. I was trying to open a barn door. But when someone parked a Lamborghini Urus in front of your responsibility, then turned their back to your reality, what choice did I have? This wasn't revenge. This was access. And I took it. Slowly. The green beast crept forward. The 12-row header, each blade sharp as a reaper's grin, hovered mere inches from the bumper of that glittering beast. I could see the reflection of the barn in the paint. It looked like a mirage, a distorted memory of what normal used to be. I tapped the brake, took a breath, let the machine idle. This was the last chance. If Karen came running now, hands up, keys out, I would stop. I had prepared for that. I was even hoping for it. But no one came. Just the wind, and the smell of heat-soaked metal and animal sweat. So I pressed forward. The first touch was gentle, deliberate, like knocking on a door you already knew was locked. The Lamborghini's rear panel flexed, then popped, a sound like an aluminum can being twisted in slow motion. The fuzzy dice in the mirror swung violently from the vibration. Still no Karen. The second push was firmer. The bumper caved, the taillights cracked, one popping with a sad little spark. Martha's phone clicked continuously. Roy let out a low whistle. Dale whispered, I feel like we should salute or something. The third pass wasn't a push, it was clearance. The hood folded like an accordion, the windshield fractured from the pressure, lines spreading like a spider's web. The luxury emblem on the back crumpled inward as the harvester moved it aside, not crushed completely. Just enough to make a path, enough to make a point. By the time I had nudged the car far enough away to unlock the barn doors, the temperature inside was pushing 95 degrees Fahrenheit. I jumped out, flung both doors wide, and a gust of heavy, ammonia-sweet air blasted into my face. The cows groaned low, relieved. Some started moving toward the feed troughs immediately. Others just stood there, stunned by the sudden breeze, blinking slowly like they had forgotten what fresh air felt like. They didn't care about lawsuits, or yoga, or how many followers Karen had on Instagram. They cared about breathing, eating, surviving, and thanks to the harvester, they could. I parked the machine beside the barn and climbed down. My boots crunched over twisted shards of taillight plastic. I looked at the wreckage and felt conflicted, not triumphant, not guilty, just sure. It was ugly. It was loud. It was expensive, but it was necessary. And when you live on land where weather, time, and market prices already conspire against you daily, you don't hesitate when something endangers your animals. You act, even if it means putting a Lamborghini in its place literally. The fallout began faster than I expected. Dale had uploaded the video that evening. No captions, no commentary, just raw footage of the harvester parting the luxury car like the Red Sea. By sunrise, it had hit 800,000 views. By noon, it was trending. Twitter, or whatever they call it, now dubbed the event Lambo Lasagna. Meme pages had already made mock-ups of the harvester with cartoon eyes and catchphrases like, "Don't block what you can't out-harvest." Someone auto-tuned the crunch of the Lamborghini bumper and turned it into a dance beat. I didn't know whether to laugh or unplug the internet, but I knew one thing for certain Karen didn't know yet. That changed the next morning. I was feeding the goats when I heard it. The sound of designer flip-flops slapping angrily against packed dirt. And then, the shriek. It wasn't a word at first. Just a noise, something between a gasp and a banshee howl that sent birds flying from the silo. I turned slowly. She was standing in front of the twisted Lamborghini like someone had killed her favorite influencer. Hands to her head, jaw slack, hair in perfect place, makeup not a smudge out of line. And then the words came. What did you do to my vehicle?" She didn't wait for an answer. She pulled out her phone mid-rage, spun toward the wreckage, and started recording. Tears instantly appeared perfectly timed, like a faucet she could turn on at will. "This man," she said to the camera, "destroyed my car with a tractor. For no reason, he is dangerous. I'm fearing for my life. Somebody tag my lawyer." The video kept rolling as she paced, pointing, gesturing like she was on some reality TV show. I stood quietly near the fence, sipping coffee, not saying a word. Eventually, she noticed me. "You," she hissed, flipping the camera to selfie mode and marching over. "You're going to jail. Do you even know how much that car costs? I will sue you into the dirt." I nodded toward the barn door. There, laminated and stapled to the wood, was a printed page with highlighted text and an official seal. The Agricultural Emergency Access Law State Clause, 49-12 paragraph B, law. 1. She read it, or tried to. The words bounced off her like rain on vinyl. "That's not real law," she snapped. "My husband's lawyer is going to eat you alive." I didn't respond. I just sipped, because the truth didn't need defending. It was laminated. By early afternoon, news crews were arriving. Someone, probably Dale, had forwarded the footage to a local station. From there, it snowballed. A satellite van parked next to the grain shed. A reporter in heels tiptoed around manure piles for a better angle. Karen gave 3 interviews, each one more dramatic than the last. She clutched her yoga mat like a wounded child, wore a shirt that read, "Peace over profit," and claimed PTSD from the sound of agricultural machinery. She said she feared for her life and accused me of vehicular intimidation. I gave one statement: I opened my barn to save animals during a heat wave. I documented it because I knew she'd sue. The law is on my side. That's all. Then I went back to work. But Karen wasn't finished. She tried to pull the HOA into it, filed complaints, demanded an emergency meeting, blamed me for setting a dangerous precedent. That's when the real reckoning began. You see, Karen didn't just live under the HOA, she tried to rule it. But the people she tried to intimidate, they were watching. And after what happened with the harvester, they weren't scared anymore. The morning after the news story aired, I had 3 voicemails, 7 text messages, and an email from a local attorney offering to represent me for free just in case it escalates. It had already escalated. Karen had officially filed a civil complaint against me. The claims: destruction of luxury property, intentional infliction of emotional distress, reckless endangerment via agricultural equipment, and my personal favorite, spiritual trauma caused by aggressive rural energy. Her filing went viral faster than the actual harvester video. Someone leaked it to the same meme page that dubbed my tractor the Green Justice Machine, and within hours, the internet responded with its own legal opinions. You parked a 6-figure SUV in front of a barn during summer and got surprised it turned into beef jerky lady. It's not harassment if the cows needed oxygen. Next time, maybe don't block a fire exit with your chakra. But memes wouldn't protect me in court. So I called Martha. She showed up with 3 binders, a legal pad, and a lemon pie. We reviewed the footage, the timestamps, the temperature readings, the state livestock protection clause, the sheriff's report, the laminated sign on my barn. Everything. "This isn't just defensible," she said. "It's airtight." Then she paused, flipping to a section she'd marked with a red tab. "But Karen isn't trying to win in court," she added. "She's trying to win in the court of public opinion. She's building a narrative. You're the unhinged farmer. She's the misunderstood victim." I looked out the window at the harvester. It gleamed in the morning sun, blades still clean from the wash Dale had given it. It looked majestic, like a tank designed to plant justice instead of seeds. "She picked the wrong farmer," I said. Martha smiled. "Good. Now, let's make sure the judge knows it." The courtroom was wood-paneled, modest, and smelled faintly of old paper and strong coffee. Judge Miller was a man in his late 60s, with the expression of someone who had mediated more cow boundary disputes than he cared to count. Karen showed up wearing beige from head to toe and a neck brace that definitely hadn't been there 2 days earlier. Her lawyer was the kind you could tell was paid by the hour, but not by results young, disinterested, flipping lazily through a thin folder. Karen opened dramatically. She claimed emotional collapse, fear of agricultural equipment, PTSD from the harvester's roar, and damages totaling $123,000 because apparently the car had sentimental value due to a healing road trip she once took to Sedona. Judge Miller raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. Then she dropped the kicker I had used my machine as a weapon. It was our turn. Martha stood, confident and quiet, and handed over a stack of documents. We had vet statements, weather reports, time-stamped footage, legal precedents, sheriff's observation, livestock health codes. Then we played the video, not the viral one, the raw, unedited version. It showed me waiting, the laminated law, the 1-hour warning note, the cows inside, audibly groaning in the heat, and then the harvester. Karen's lawyer tried to object. Judge Miller held up a hand. "No, I want to see this." When it ended, the room was quiet except for the judge softly saying, "Well, that explains the urgency." He leaned forward. "Did your client make any attempt to move the vehicle after being contacted?" Karen stuttered. "I was in meditation. Did you notify the barn owner of that?" "No. But did you see the warning note on your windshield?" "I thought it was a joke." Miller leaned back, noted. That was the beginning of the end. Outside the courthouse, cameras waited. Karen tried to breeze past them, but one reporter called out, "What do you say to people calling you Lamborghini lasagna?" She hissed. "This is harassment," and vanished into a waiting Uber. Her car, what was left of it, was still sitting near my barn, now declared evidence. Meanwhile, the HOA was in full meltdown. Karen had tried to weaponize the homeowners association as her next attack dog. She filed a complaint that my harvester operation violated aesthetic disruption ordinances. Then she lobbied to pass a new bylaw restricting farm machinery within 600 feet of community boundaries. The HOA board, mostly retirees who liked quiet mornings and hated drama, panicked. Turns out, Karen had been making decisions on behalf of the board without a vote for months. One board member, Harold, called me privately. "We didn't approve any of this," he whispered. "She's acting alone. Most of us just want to garden and play golf." But it got worse. A clerk at the county building flagged the HOA petition. Why? Because 5 of the signatures were forged. Same handwriting, same pen, and 2 of the people had moved out over a year ago. The investigation opened quickly. Karen vanished from the yoga tent. Her name disappeared from flyers. The HOA quietly removed her from the board, citing reputational risk. Martha called it a tactical retreat. I called it karma in linen pants. But Karen wasn't finished. She filed one final complaint, this time with my insurance company, claiming emotional distress, environmental damage, disruption of spiritual energy patterns across shared land boundaries. My agent, Hank, called, laughing so hard he nearly dropped the phone. "She says your harvester broke her chakra grid." He denied the claim immediately, but the harassment had taken a toll. I began locking the gates at night. I stopped leaving the barn unattended. Because Karen may have been cornered, but she hadn't surrendered, not yet, and I had a feeling she was planning something bigger. I should have known it wasn't over. 3 weeks had passed since the courtroom victory. The cows were healthy, the fields were green, the barn door swung freely in the wind like nothing had ever stood in its way. The Lamborghini still sat to the side, twisted, sun-faded, and silent, like the remains of a monument someone tried to forget. People stopped by to take photos. Kids pointed. Parents shook my hand. One elderly woman gave me a hug and whispered, "You did what we all wanted to do to HOA meetings." For the first time in months, I had peace. Until I got the envelope. It arrived in a glossy black folder, sealed in gold foil with the words, "Sunwell Living, LLC Transforming Wellness." Inside was a formal development proposal, corporate letterhead, color-printed site plans, language like chakra realignment stations, and forest-integrated silence domes. They weren't subtle, the location. The plot adjacent to my south pasture, the signature on the bottom, Richard Palmer, Karen's husband. So, that was the next move. If Karen couldn't crush me with HOA rules, lawsuits, or memes, she'd try to box me in with development, a wellness retreat, wrapped in lavender-scented manipulation and marketed with terms like eco-conscious enlightenment. I wasn't angry, not yet. I was impressed. It was strategic, polished, calculated, but it had one fatal flaw. They didn't own all the land they thought they did. You see, months earlier, when Karen started her Block the Barn saga, I took a quiet little trip to the county records office. There, I filed for a provisional conservation easement on my southern border, a state program that protected land used for agriculture by limiting what could be built near it. Back then, it was precaution. Now, it was checkmate. The easement had been approved 2 days after the courtroom hearing, quietly, officially, permanently. It created a 100-foot no-build buffer zone between my fields and any neighboring construction, and that buffer, it covered every inch of the land Karen's husband had just acquired. Still, I didn't gloat, because I knew Karen. She wouldn't quit with zoning, so I looked deeper into their plans. That's when I found the real weapon, water. According to Sunwell's filings, they planned to dig 2 private wells and redirect runoff from my irrigation slope into their planned natural filtration pond. That wasn't just shady. That was illegal. They never asked permission, never filed a joint easement. If they touched my runoff, my cows could die from disrupted irrigation patterns. My soil could erode. My fencing could flood. And worst of all, they'd tried to sneak it through on a misfiled plat map, shifting the boundary 20 feet south onto my land. I called Roy. His cousin, thankfully, was a licensed hydrologist. 2 days later, I had a signed impact report, aerial drone footage, slope maps, and 3 documents stating this proposed development violates both state-level agricultural runoff protections and local zoning transparency law. I sent the packet to the county board and CC'd the local news. 3 days later, headlines spread, wellness retreat threatens family farm's water supply. Animal rights groups reposted. So did veterans organizations. The same moms who bought eggs from me every Saturday now flooded Karen Sunwell Instagram page with corn emojis and "Dishar, leave the land alone." Even the local pastor got involved. He told the paper, "Wellness is fine, but not when it silences the land it claims to heal." Karen tried to respond. She held a press conference, barefoot, in front of a field of dying sunflowers that had clearly been planted too late. She wore a white shawl, spoke in hushed tones, said she believed in co-creation with the earth. That was before a clip leaked of her yelling at a chicken for pooping near her yoga mat. That clip. It ended up on late-night TV. Meanwhile, the Lamborghini. I had it towed to my southern fence line, right on the border, parked it like a chrome tombstone, called up a welder, bolted it to a steel slab. Above it, I mounted a hand-painted wooden sign, "Blocked this barn, now guards this land. Underneath private property, keep out. This machine has history." Within a week, it became a tourist attraction. Someone made a Google pin. The local museum tried to buy it. I refused. Because that wasn't just a wrecked car, it was a reminder. But Karen wasn't done. Her final move came in the form of a man in a tailored suit with slicked back hair and a briefcase. He knocked on my front door, introduced himself as a mediator from Sunwell, said they'd like to resolve remaining tensions, then slid a folder across the table. Inside, a settlement offer, a 6-figure check. In exchange for me removing the car, dismantling the sign, agreeing not to speak further about the issue publicly. Basically take the hush money and disappear. I closed the folder, stood, walked over to the window, and looked out at the pasture, at the cows, the broken car, the green harvester still parked like a sleeping dragon. Then I turned back to him and said, "Tell your client I've already been paid. By every neighbor who brought me pie. By every child who sat in my tractor. By a town that stood up when someone thought they could buy it." I handed the folder back. "Keep your check. You're not buying silence. Not here." He left without another word. 2 weeks later, I got the notice Sunwell Living had withdrawn their zoning application. No statement, no apology, just silence. Which, for once, I appreciated. It had been 3 weeks since Karen packed up her essential oils, sage sticks, and shattered pride and rolled out of town like a bad storm cloud finally losing steam. Sunwell Living went silent. The wellness retreat plans were scrapped. The plat maps were redacted. And for the first time in what felt like forever, my mornings began not with legal threats, but with the sound of birds, the rustle of corn, and the low, satisfied rumble of cattle who knew they were safe. But something was different. The farm hadn't just survived the siege. It had become a symbol. Every day, someone new stopped by to say thank you, to shake my hand, to take a picture with the now legendary Lamborghini monument bolted to the edge of the south pasture. A kid handed me a hand-drawn comic book titled The Harvester Avenger, in which I wore a cape and rescued goats from evil yoga cults with hydraulic fists. I laughed so hard I nearly dropped my coffee. But beneath the absurdity, there was truth. In a world where money often silences reason, where ego tramples roots, and where land is treated like leverage, one angry farmer with a harvester had drawn a line, and people remembered. The town declared the week Local Agriculture Week. Martha brought lemon pies. Roy brought jokes. The feed store printed t-shirts that read, "Don't block my barn." Someone hung a banner across Main Street that said, "Respect the soil," or "Get rolled." Even the mayor stopped by, shook my hand, said something about restoring faith in rural grit. But the best moment. It came one golden afternoon when a family pulled up in a dusty minivan, mom, dad, and a wide-eyed little boy in overalls gripping a toy harvester with chipped green paint. They got out shyly. The dad said, "We've driven 2 hours. My son, he saw the video. Thinks you're a hero." I didn't know what to say, until the boy looked up and asked, "Is that the real tractor that squished the mean lady's car?" I laughed, kneeled down. "Sure is." His eyes lit up like Christmas. I let him sit in the seat of the real harvester, turn the wheel, make the sounds. He grinned the whole time. And I thought, this is why we fight, not for revenge, for moments like this. Because farmland isn't just soil. It's memory. It's heritage. It's what you leave behind, not what you build over. Karen never returned. Rumors say she moved to Arizona, started a new wellness consulting brand. One of my neighbors said they saw her in a commercial for gluten-free kombucha yoga socks. I didn't care. She could rebrand all she wanted. She'd never own this place again. 1 week later, I got a letter from the State Agricultural Council. Apparently, the viral video had reached their office. They were nominating the farm for a Rural Resilience Award for defending agricultural rights with dignity and lawful action. I didn't do it for the recognition, but I smiled when I read the final line. Sometimes the most powerful machines in a community aren't in the city, they're on the farm. I stood at the edge of the pasture that evening. The sun dipped low, cattle grazed lazily, the harvester gleamed, and the broken Lamborghini, still bolted in place, stood like a silent scarecrow, warning off future Karens with chrome scars and quiet pride. As I turned to head back to the barn, I noticed someone had tied a red ribbon around one of the harvester's railings. No name, no note, just a simple gesture, maybe a thank you, maybe a symbol, or maybe the universe's way of saying, well done. Because in the end, Karen had tried to rewrite the story, to make the land hers, to bend the town into an aesthetic. But she forgot one thing. This land remembers who respects it, who feeds it, and who dares to block its barn. And when the land remembers, it pushes back, sometimes with laws, sometimes with unity, and sometimes with a harvester.